So figure it out.
My last name is
Yeah.
Blaszewski. I
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, just
That's
stop.
probably
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you hit record?
Yes.
I'm also.
Yeah, we were like
All right, I guess
trying to find people.
we're going.
Subleasing.
Okay. Hi,
Thank you.
I'm Susan Liebow. I'm the director of the Wayno Wadera Center for Student Success, and I am also an assistant dean of students at Michigan Tech.
And I'm Heather Simpson, and I also work in the Wadera Center.
And so GSG invited us to come and talk a little bit about time management and backwards planning. And kind of like my disclaimer that I do at the beginning of presentations is, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Some of these things you might be really familiar with. Some of these things might be new to you. I understand you're all individuals and you all have different needs and different expectations, and your experiences are different based on degrees and disciplines, and that your commitments also vary based on who you are. One of the things that I did, so Heather and I work a lot with primarily undergraduate students around resources related to success. We also have been graduate students while we did it while we were working full time. So we had that kind of an experience. And so we know the best practices around things like time management and backwards planning because they really don't change that much whether you're a student or you're working or you have a family. But what I did to get in the right mindset is I talked to about 10 people who are current or recently graduated graduate students from Michigan Tech. And so I kind of asked them what were the things that were really valuable for them. And I asked them the things that really sort of were roadblocks or impeded things for them. And I actually found a lot of consistencies from that conversation. So I'm going to share some of those anecdotes with you because I think they're valuable to hear how other people manage their time. So recently, Heather coordinated a session where we talked about articles related to balance, right? Being balanced. And one of the articles had this quote that talks about how, you know, we talk about time management, but time management isn't like financial management, right? So I've got 4 extra hours from Wednesday, and I'm going to set it over here, and I'm going to earn some interest on it. And then next week, I'll have 6 hours to work with. We all know that doesn't work that way. The whole idea behind time management is that we're being as productive and efficient and as effective with the time we have right now. So our goals for the day is to have an honest discussion about the struggles of self-management as a graduate student. Because we know it's hard. It's probably one of the hardest things that you'll do as a person. It's harder than having a career in many respects. And you talk to people who have done it, and they're happy that they did it. But man, was it hard, right? And we'll reinforce or hopefully provide some ideas you haven't thought about. So reinforce some things that you're doing. Maybe you can share some things that really work for you that will help make your life more efficient and manageable. That doesn't mean I can put more hours in the day, because I think we'd all like that some days, right? And it doesn't mean I can necessarily take away some of your workload, which would be nice sometimes too. But we also want to recognize that pursuing an advanced degree really can be grueling. And those conversations, I know it instinctively that it's hard, right? Because I've experienced some of that myself. But you step away from it, you kind of forget. But having some of those conversations with folks reminded me like, oh yeah, every day, all day, every day, there's something to get done. And that can be really difficult. But at the end, I think we want to believe that it's going to be worth it, right?
And so like Susan said, she and I both did pursue master's degrees. We both pursued them here at Michigan Tech while we were full-time employees. So we do get it. I got mine in applied science education. So there were a lot of commitments, a lot of things I had to keep kind of the balls in the air, right? But something I found really useful for myself was to kind of stop every once in a while, particularly when I was feeling really overwhelmed and just really wondering if it was all worth it, was why was I doing it? And so as we were talking, we were thinking about getting together and talking to you all about time management and backwards planning, is I think it was valuable for us to stop and have a kind of a reaffirming moment of why we're here. Like, what is it that education and in the long run, work means to you? And so I want you to kind of, so this is going to be the first thing we're going to take you maybe out of your comfort zone. So you're going to be doing a little bit of talking at your tables. But I want you to kind of think of, what is your philosophy of education and work? Okay, and when I'm talking about work, it's not necessarily, I'm going to get a paycheck, but what is it? What is it that makes you get up every day? What is it that gives you some excitement? What are you looking forward to doing? And what are you hoping that this education is going to help you achieve? And so some of the things I want you to think about are, why a higher ed degree? Okay? What is education for? What does it mean to you? What is work for you? Does money have anything to do with what you're doing? Like, for the long run? Like, is that end goal a paycheck, or is it something bigger than that to you? And what does experience, growth, and fulfillment have to do with it? So I wanted you to take a couple of minutes right now and just jot down some ideas of, why are you here? What does education mean for you? And what is it that you hope to do in the future? Like, what's going to make you keep going forward? And you don't have to come up with the answers for each of those questions. Those are things to just kind of get you thinking about it. Like, if you had to write your philosophy statement, what would that look like? What things would you want to include? I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds or so, then I'm going to ask you to take a risk and share at your tables. Okay, I'd like you to take the next 2 or 3 minutes to share some of your ideas at your table. So what are some of the ideas that you came up with of why you're here, what education is for you, what your views are on what you want to do?
Already have one, I guess you could say.
So why I hired engineering?
Honestly, I need higher education if I want to have a job more competitive in a field where we either get good jobs by having less experience or having higher less actually like just it only makes you so competitive. That's a big reason. But on a personal level, I've always wanted to have a job that's for your the idea of having a hand and being able to protect different stores. That's the real reason.
I guess my situation I was mystery work. So
of course, money is very distracting, but not everything. Maybe having a job that's not representation, you might be.
I guess money is something like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, wherever.
It's one of those questions. Also, something that not everything is cannot give you this.
I know the seasonal things that we still
Until I clarified for this
everything's gotten so technical recently. Right now working on kind of more research end of it. So it's not like my undergrad where a lot of my labs were let's go run around in the woods and learn about what's happening in the ecosystem. Now it's like you're gonna sit down, you're gonna read like 20 papers.
That's been a really
I used to be such a fast.
Oh, yeah, you just worry about the other.
I got to college. Time management degree is just like knowing I have to sit down to read like a 20-page deep text like this big. Like I can't understand.
I've been
I even convince myself to do that sometimes.
I can't do anything else. Like just
Okay, has everybody had an opportunity to share some of their thoughts with their group?
you get to share things with professionals.
Yeah, the process of that group.
Okay, 2 minutes? Okay,
right, yeah.
2 minutes.
I was thinking in the
And if you need more snacks, eat snacks. Lots of snacks.
So the reason I made my application was to have a better model, better prospect.
Well, I'll be
The second is much
I know, I was thinking that too.
my second question I think is exactly check to
I live in
so
Chicago.
in order to understand the market, to have
Yeah, it's like 3 hours.
But
But just get
that's
it.
why I'm doing everything.
I've never met anyone else who's that big. It's very
Work is like you should love to work for. You should not count as just like your
Okay, that's like your my dad.
Physically
She's driving up on Thursday.
All right, so we've got about 30 seconds, so wrap up those thoughts.
for me, I'm opted for higher education to get just all the interaction. And I love to get to know how to and get the public figure, all the things and getting to know people more. And for me, money is like a way of living a better life. I got to retrieve
Okay.
and for me,
Does anybody want to share
many times
with the whole group some of your ideas or thoughts about what education and work mean to you?
Yeah, so the main reason why I've taken a higher education degree, first of all, is to enhance my problem solving skills. So the given problem, I want to learn how to break it up into smaller sizable chunks and then address it in a manner in which it should be done. And considering all the factors and balance it out. So undergraduate did not provide me that, so I believe a higher education will provide me that. And when it comes to work is always for a better tomorrow. It's not just putting money into a CEO's pockets, but rather seeing the impact of my work out there in the society that I live in. And according to me, money does buy happiness and fulfillment. It's just my opinion.
Okay.
So it's always that one driving factor. Let's say if you earn $1 million, at the end of the day you're not satisfied. You want to earn $2 million the next day. So it always is something that drives and pushes you further. So money does play a significant role, but it sort of saturates after a while. And experience, growth, and fulfillment, I look at it as the number of problems I solve, the impact of each problem. I do not want to work on the same problem over a 40-year period. I want to work on different projects, connect with different people, new places, new people, and new problems. I want to address all of it at the end of, say, 30 years. So, yeah, this is
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share?
So I guess the original reason for mine is very much kind of money related. I got my undergraduate here in wildlife ecology, and if you want to do a career in natural resources, you either need to have a lot of experience or a lot of higher learning under your belt. It's just kind of how it works. I mean, you can get lucky, but odds are you're going to end up doing, a lot of seasonal jobs and maybe living a very kind of paycheck to paycheck life for a while. And while that's like not something, like it's not like I would not ever do that, it would be nice if I could jump in like a full-time job, like an actual management position, and not just, have to kind of run through the ringer of doing the field work season after season and trying to find work for the winter. So that's a big reason for me. And then also I'm like really stubborn, because I know a lot of people that got my degree as an undergraduate, like they don't work in that field at all. I'm like, no, you've got to work in this field. So that's how I ended up in grad school.
We have time for maybe one more if anybody has any. Okay. Well, Susan and I did an activity similar to this in a professional development experience. And once I started actually thinking about things, it really kind of reinforced the reasons why I do the work I do. And it really was, I do it because I want to help students. I want to see people succeed. And the other things, yeah, I need some kind of way to make a living, because that's, society. We need to pay a mortgage, or we need to pay rent, and we need to feed ourselves, and those kinds of things. But really intrinsically, I think what I really discovered or rediscovered and kind of re-energized myself was I really do have a passion for the work that I do. I really like what I do. I really like working with students. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity to, maybe if you're feeling, particularly if this isn't your first semester, maybe you've been here for a couple of years, and we're at the end of week 11, and it's snowed a lot already, and it's been like 15 is a high. It could be a real time when you're starting to go, okay, what was the reason why I'm here again? Yeah, I want to kind of think about managing my time, but why? Why am I here? And so I think sometimes it's just really important to stop and step back and kind of reflect on why you're doing what you're doing and why you're putting yourself through what you're putting yourself through, to hopefully refine that motivation to continue going forward. Okay, so there's purpose for why we asked you to take this time to kind of pause and reflect on what it is that you're doing here for yourself. So, which brings us into one of our first topics that we really wanted to talk to you about, is backwards planning. How many of you use backwards planning right now as a regular basis? Okay, great. Then you can help give us some other suggestions for what we're talking about, okay? But we use this in the professional world. We use this ourselves when we were pursuing our master's degrees. It's just a really great way to kind of reset your steps and give yourself deadlines so you don't get into a situation where you feel like you are completely behind and overwhelmed and you can't really see a way out of the pile of work that you've let kind of take over, okay? Anybody ever feel that way? Like it just keeps piling up and how am I ever gonna get through everything? Because like Susan pointed out, you can't bank those extra hours. So, you know, the university might be closed next week for classes, but that doesn't mean the work's necessarily going away. We still have all the due dates. So how can we better plan ahead and manage what we're doing is what we're gonna talk about. And so it's really thinking about what are your goals for the week, the month, the semester. How do you prioritize what it is that you're doing? And also remembering that planning shouldn't supersede actually doing, right?
You're laughing because some of you.
I know, because sometimes you can put all this time and effort and you have this really great plan, and then you're like, I'm just gonna plan some more because that's more entertaining than the doing. I cannot tell you how many times I found fascination in doing laundry and dishes while I was trying to write my thesis because I didn't want to. So then everything else became a priority, and then, you know, that stuff just doesn't go away. And so that's kind of what we're hoping that we can kind of help you think about. And so I've given you a sheet because, again, I want you to kind of take some time and think about this right here. So you've got a two-sided sheet. You have a back side. But what I want you to think about, what we're asking you to think about, is what is a goal that you have? So if maybe you've got some kind of a really big deadline that you're trying to hit this semester still. Maybe you want to take a look at planning next semester. I'm not sure where everybody's at in their program. I'm not sure how many of you are master's candidates and PhD candidates. So everybody's coming from a different place. But what is a deadline that you've got coming up? And I want you to select something. So maybe you have, I'll give you an example. So maybe you have a semester term paper. I know, you've got probably 15, right? So what is something that you know? So if your professor, your advisor assigns you a task, what do you know? What's usually the first thing you know? What's the deadline? When does it have to be done? So for this example, let's just say you need to turn this final paper in on the day of final exams. Okay, so in our traditional semester at Michigan Tech, that would be week 15 when final exams are. So you know a deadline, you know a date. So what do you need to do looking backwards to give yourself enough time to complete that assignment? What are the tasks or steps involved that you need to think about? Okay, and that's what we're asking you to do. And so I wanted to give you something, because I know personally I like takeaways. I like to have something to reflect back on, particularly if it's something I might find useful later on. So what are those steps that you need to use to achieve that goal? What steps do you need to do? So in my example of writing a term paper and turning it in on the day of the final, the immediate task for me would be, what am I going to write about? Coming up with my topic. And then what steps and deadlines do I need to set for myself? And so it's really, what are the tasks? probably gonna have to research, I'm gonna have to find resources, I'm gonna have to do a lot of reading, and I would write myself a task list, and then I would set deadlines next to those tasks. And that's what this sheet is asking you to do. So I want you to take a couple of minutes and think about, what is a deadline you have? And maybe it's something literally this semester. Maybe you have something that's looming that's due December 15th. So if it's due December 15th, and it is November 14th, what can you do in the next 31 days to hit your goal? So that's what we're asking you to take a look at. Okay? So you want to flip your paper over. Maybe you have to plan your next semester or your next 2 semesters. I'm not sure if any of you have completed your IDP with your advisor at any time. So
We'll talk about it later.
yeah, the what? The who? So there's a thing called an individual development plan. Okay, and so with your advisor, you can sit down and you can look at, if you're a master's candidate, what steps are involved between when you start and when you end. What do you need to do, and what are those deadlines? PhD candidates, the same thing. And then here at Michigan Tech, we have a template that you can use on the grad school website. I will make sure you have those resources. And it also includes topics you can talk about with your advisor. So you can kind of talk through some of those components. So backwards planning is similar to an individual development plan conceptually. So with an individual development plan, you are planning out what you need to do each semester until you achieve your goal of graduating, completing your coursework, and completing your dissertation, so you get your piece of paper that says that you have your master's or your PhD from Michigan Tech. Okay, so what I'm asking you to do here is just kind of bring it down a little bit. And what's something you need to work on? What's something that is weighing on you right now? And I want to give you an opportunity to kind of reflect on what steps you need to. Okay, I know a number of you, you're just getting started. You're just writing things down. This is something that you can continue hopefully practicing when you leave here today. But how many of you have, and I know the answer to this already, competing priorities? I do. How do you prioritize? So you have one goal, right? So I asked you to look at one goal, but odds are if you're doing coursework, you've got 2 or 3 courses you're taking. And you might be teaching, you might be doing research. How do you prioritize the competing priorities?
And that's just school.
Right. And that's just, right? And then we try to have lives. We do, right? I mean, some of us sitting in this room, we might have families. We might have children. We might have partners. We might have roommates we're navigating. We, you know, how do you layer these competing priorities? And backwards planning is what has actually saved me professionally and personally. So I always have, and I use Google Calendar. I live by Google Calendar. And I have all of my competing priorities planned out on Google Calendar as much as I can. And I try to backwards plan as much as I can, even in my personal life. I'm down micromanaged to the fact that I have a dog who's special needs, who needs medication every 12 hours. And so I have backwards planned how I can navigate those things daily.
And her phone barks at her.
It does. At 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., my phone will bark even when it's on silent because it's an alarm. And that's embarrassing when you're sitting at a formal dinner. And you're like, wow, my phone's barking right now. Why, there's a panel up there. But that's, it happened real recently and Susan was on the panel. But that's how I have to function. I have to kind of figure out what's coming ahead so I can plan for it in manageable pieces. And that's what we're asking you to contemplate when you're working with your bigger projects, with your coursework, and then navigating your ins and outs of your personal life. What can you do? You know what's going to be coming up. How can you set yourself daily, weekly, monthly deadlines to help you stay on top of things, to help you keep yourself managed so you're not feeling panicked and overwhelmed?
And that was consistent amongst everybody that I talked to, regardless of what their field of study was, but regardless of what level they were at, is that backwards planning and coming up with those steps and those step deadlines was critical to staying on task and getting things done. And one person that I talked to, it was an interesting conversation, probably more, I think it's more interesting than anybody else, but he's working on his PhD in an engineering discipline. And he had a paper, he's working on a paper with multiple people, and they needed to submit this paper a certain date. And so he said, you know, this is how I do it. The absolute last day that it could be done with any sort of realistic expectation that people could edit it, review it, right, is November 1st. And so I tried to get it done by October 15th. And I said, well, why wouldn't you just have the date be October 15th? And he said, I don't like to miss deadlines. So he said it went all the way to, he finished it October 5th. He was done October 31st, right? And I said, so for you, it's like you push the deadline as far as you can. You hope to get it done ahead of time, right? But you don't make the internal, like your internal, you don't have your hard deadline be 2 weeks ahead of time, because a lot of times you can't make it happen. And for you, it's really like discouraging to miss a deadline. And I thought that was really interesting, but it just really kind of gave me some insight. Like, we know that everybody works differently. So if you need that deadline, like where that deadline is isn't about me, right? It's about you and what you need to kind of get things done and stay on track. So all of these things that we talk about are really subjective to what you need, because some of these are just mental tricks that we play with ourselves, right? You got something to say?
It's the same kind of thing, like when you know yourself, like I'm chronically late to everything all the time, like today. So if I want to, I had office hours until 3, that's why. But so if I want to be on time for something, I say in my head that I need to be there like 15 minutes before I actually do, so I get there on time.
But it's like the tricks that we need for ourselves, and everybody doesn't need them, right? I just had a conversation with somebody about time yesterday, and how for some people time is like this fluid wave, and it's like, oh, I lost all track of time. I don't lose track of time. I'm like doing something, and I can tell you what time it is just internally, right? And it's kind of a curse, right? Because you're always like, oh my God, you always know what time it is, right? And so you got to work with what you got, right? I mean, really. So I'm going to talk some about kind of some thoughts and some ideas around best practices and things that relate to just kind of straight time management, and things that you can do to help yourself. And like I said at the beginning, everybody's different, and some of you might be really good at this stuff already. And if you have thoughts or suggestions, jump on in, right? But I'm hoping everybody can take away some things that will be helpful. So a really valuable thing is doing a time audit and figuring out where your time is actually going. Because sometimes we think we know, but we don't actually know. And so using an app or using a piece of paper or using a spreadsheet and tracking what you do for a couple weeks and seeing where your time is actually going can be really helpful. And that's not just like your daytime. That's like how much you're sleeping, how much you're spending doing tasks around, your household, doing X, Y, or Z, whatever it might be, really getting a full understanding of what you do in any given day. The other thing that can be really important with auditing time is like when you work well. And so sometimes this is not under our control, right? Sometimes we don't have full control of when we go to class, when we teach class, when we need to be in office hours, when we do whatever. But sometimes we do. And some things we may do better at certain times of day. My best example for myself right now is we're on the first floor. We're downstairs in the Water Center, and it tends to be a pretty active place. People coming in, students coming in, people stopping in, dropping by. And so being there when no one's there, regardless of when that is, can help me be really productive, right? Because if it's not something that I need to work with other people on, I don't have any interruptions, and I can just kind of grind stuff out for a while. And it's different for different tasks, right? So things that you might do well in the morning, like maybe you're really alert and you're really good at reading or writing in the morning, may not be something you want to push off till the end of the day. And if you have flexibility of when you can do it, you can actually do it more efficiently if you're kind of aware of those times of day that you're more productive. And then how long actual activities take for you to do. And so this was another interesting conversation I had was, you have to do this whatever, right? Whether it's writing a paper or reading articles or whatever it is. And in your mind, sometimes you allot this amount of time for it. And sometimes it's kind of arbitrary. Like, it's going to take about 97 minutes, right? But, you can track how long it takes you typically to read an article, right? And you can track how long it takes for you to kind of write. You can track it over time and say, I average about a page every 6 days. No, just kidding. I average writing a page every couple hours, right? I got something down on paper every couple hours. And you can budget your time that way because you have a better sense of how long it actually takes, right? And it's not a perfect science. Like some things that take longer to read, but if you have an estimate, it can help you really be more realistic. Because maybe things you're like, oh, I keep running out of time. Because maybe some things really do take longer than you think they do, right? And then overestimating the time that tasks take.
Yeah.
And going, okay, so nobody's bummed if it only takes, you budget for 3 hours and it only takes 2. Like nobody's like, dang it, I got an hour, I can't bank it, I can't get interest on it, right? Nobody's bummed if you finish early and you've got some time to work on something else or go take a break or whatever it is you want to do. And we accept too that like a lot of times we don't get things done because other people are interrupting or their priorities are superseding what we're doing, right? Like I'm doing my thing and Heather doesn't have anything she needs to do and she doesn't think she's like interrupting. I mean, she might because I make a face like, you know, get out.
And then you just kind of go through it and interrupt.
But sometimes those things happen, and sometimes life happens, right? Sometimes we get a flat tire, or we get the flu, or something happens. So when you have some buffer, some insulation in your day-to-day, it can really help you stay on track with those little things that you're trying to do every day to get to that bigger goal. And then, well, this is you.
And then communicating. So back to those like competing priorities, right? So you might have your to-do list, but your advisor comes in and says, well, I need you to do this. And then all of a sudden that becomes your priority. Supervisors, lab supervisors, advisors in particular, like you need to do this. Okay, that's now my priority. But along with that is how do you communicate? Period. And then how do you communicate with your advisor? And or your committee if you have a committee formed. Like how do you communicate with them? Do you know, or if you're working with a team, if you're working with a project team, how do you communicate with each other? If you're working in a lab and you're working together, integrated in a lab, how do you communicate with each other? And what's the preferred method of communication? To kind of help with those priorities and help with your auditing of time, how can you communicate so you can make sure you're staying on top of things if somebody needs you to do something different, okay? But what is your advisor's preferred method of communication? So if you're checking in, if you're working for them in a lab, if you've got questions, do they prefer email? Do they want you to stop by in person? Do they want you to call? Like how do they want you to communicate? If you don't know that yet, make sure you have that understanding, okay? And how often do they want to touch base with you? Odds are it's not daily. Is it weekly? And then how often do you need to have that connection time to make sure you're staying on task with what you need to do, okay? And this is where the individual development plan comes into play as well, because those conversations you can have with your faculty as you're completing your form. And there's guided questions within that, okay? That's kind of the way we threw this in here, just to make sure that you have an understanding what the expectation is of communication with all the players that you're working with. And then I'm going to hand these out now. I think there's enough for both. You might have received these in some other fashion. The individual development plan, again, just to kind of summarize what I've kind of referenced. So it's that opportunity to reflect and develop a strategy for your education here. Manage your expectations and maintain a positive working relationship with your advisor. And then minimize any misunderstandings and conflicts, okay? Because sometimes some of our challenges with time management or how to plan can stem from some of these things. And so these bookmarks that we got from the grad school, the most important takeaway in this is the website that's found at the bottom. Great resources if you've not visited that site. I highly recommend you going and checking it out because there's some really valuable resources for how to work with your advisor, how to find mentors, those kinds of things there, okay?
So coming back to circling back to some of the best practices and the ways to be efficient and effective, there's a lot of folks that I talked about that idea of intentionality and focus. And these are people that are doing something 6 or 7 days a week, 12 or 14 days, 14 days, 12 or 14 hours a day, which is not uncommon, right? But one of the things they said is that, there's certain things that you need to do, and you really need to be focused on it, right? And if you can focus for 4 hours and be really deliberate, then there's other things you can do that don't require that same focus. So understanding what you need to be focused on and what you need to minimize distractions to get done, and getting that done so you can move on to those other things that maybe don't require so much attention is important to know. The other thing is when you get stuck, right? And sometimes you get a little stuck and it's more of I just need to take a break from this and breathe and take a little walk. Knowing when it's good to get up and walk away for a little while or do something else for a little while. Or when you get real stuck and you need to talk to somebody, whether that's a peer or an advisor about, like, I'm here and I'm not really sure what to do next. That can save a lot of time wondering and not being productive, right? Another thing that's really like a super simple idea that I think a lot of people probably do anyway is when you're working and you're focused and you're being intentional and you're doing things, sometimes things just sort of creep in there, right? Something about school, something about life. Maybe it's I've got to get some milk on my way home. And it's hot. Like, sometimes those things can take you away from what you're doing. And the simplest thing to do is have a journal or have a piece of paper or have a Post-it note and write those things down and put them in that parking lot. Set them aside to come back to so you can focus on what's happening. And I don't think we are always good at doing that, myself included. Like, I get it, because I have a tendency to sort of have the next great idea. It's usually not that great an idea, but in the moment it is, and it's like, oh, and it's like, nope, write it down, come back to it later when you have time, and finish what you're doing. And so organization is another one of those things that's so dependent on who you are. And there's so many different ways to manage what you need to manage. And there's a lot of moving parts, right? So you might have to keep track of things that you're reading, and you might have to be keeping track of research, and you might have to keep keeping track of both in many different capacities, right? As well as other things that you might have to be doing. Like if you're teaching, you might be keeping track of all of those things, which is a whole nother battle, right? The thing about organization, and I compare it to, so I live, everybody knows where Jim's is, Jim's Food Mart, so I live up behind Jim's, right? And I walk to work most days. And so last winter, I would walk by, and there would be this house, student rental, right? And somebody was usually out there shoveling, if there was snow had fallen, they were out there and they would clear the driveway every day. Somebody would be out there. I'd walk home and the driveway was always clear. Okay, and then a little further down, like the first snowfall happened, and maybe somebody did something, and they never really shoveled the entire, like, unless they absolutely desperately had to shovel, right? And so you know what happens, right? You're driving in over the snow, you go home for break, and the car's covered. You come back, and finally you have to surrender, and you have to shovel, and you're shoveling. And these guys were shoveling for like days. Like 2 days they had to shovel to get their driveway even to where they could sort of park there. And this guy up here, or woman, or whoever it was, well, that driveway's been out there half an hour every day. No problems, right? And I think about that because I think of organization the same way, right? So you've got all these different things, and if you just take a couple minutes every day and make sure everything's sort of put where it needs to be, it's a pain, right? Oh, I gotta take care of this, right? But it's way easier than trying to shovel that driveway the snow's been piling up for 4 months. It's trying to put all these things and find all these things and put them in the right place. So organization is different for everybody, absolutely. And there's people that will tell you this system or that system, and it's something you have to figure out yourself. But the great thing about 2018 is that if you like technology, which I like technology, but I like Post-it notes too. I kind of have that balance, you know. There's all these great tools that you can use, right, to help you manage yourself, to help you set up timelines, to have something give you a reminder that your timeline's today, or you better get going because you're going to be late, right?
Yeah.
There's all these great things for that. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because y'all are educated people who can figure this out on your own if you're not always already using these tools. But it's a great way to manage yourself, right? And then this is what, so I supervise a group called Academic Success Coaches. And so they work with primarily undergraduate students in like the softer skills like time management and those kinds of things. And they love, this is their favorite thing right now, the Kanban board, right? Because it's visual and they've got like ones that they print out and then they'll write them on the whiteboard and whatever. But it's really tracking things through, it's not working, but it's really tracking things through when you need to get them done, right? So you need to do them, you're working on them, and then they're done. And there's a lot of ways to do this organization and this time management thing. And I think that it can be very frustrating for some of us who don't necessarily like to have a rigid life. But unfortunately, this is a rigid life. So get it done with, and then maybe you can, you know, be less rigid later. I don't know what I did, but.
And then one other tool I want to throw out there that I use regularly when I was going through my master's program here. If you've not gone to an EndNote workshop yet, go to an EndNote workshop that either the grad school or the library hosts. That's going to be one of your best tools to manage journal articles. So everything that you need to read for when you're writing your lit review and whatever else you need to do for your other classes, it's just the best. If you get into the habit now and you can keep everything in EndNote so you have the resources there when you go to have to use them later on. And so it's not, oh my gosh, which pile in my writing space is that document that I know I marked up 4 months ago? Where is it living? I can just go into EndNote and I can find it again. So please take advantage of that. It's a phenomenal tool. There's other tools out there that do the same thing, but you can go to a workshop here and learn how to use it. So it's a great management tool for all of the journal articles and readings that you have to manage to later go back and use.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about managing writing, and one of the folks that I talked to specifically let me take a look at this book that they found super helpful for them to kind of get on track and stay on track. And some of the really valuable suggestions from this specific publication was that committing to a regular schedule. And I think committing to a regular schedule applies to a lot of different things, right? So if you have a meeting with your advisor, if you have a meeting with your committee, you're going to go to that, right? You're going to have a scheduled time and you're going to show up, right? Maybe a little late, but you'll be there, right? But you don't always do that for yourself, right? So if you want to get writing done, sometimes I think for some people it becomes this flexible thing, like you're going to try to get it done sometime during the day. And it gets kicked back, and something happens, and you kick it back, and kick it back, and kick it back, and then it's 11 o'clock, and you're like, well, maybe tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And so with some of these things, when we talk about backwards planning and time management, you have to make meetings with yourself that you don't break, right? So committing to a regular time and with flexibility. I'm not a monster. You can put it off for a half an hour here or there, or an hour or whatever. But committing to regular times for those things that you have to get done and saying, you know what, I can't go do that, or taking yourself out of the mix. So if you're in a place where there's a lot of interruptions and you can be productive in a different space and you can be there, using that productive space, making a commitment to yourself and not being negotiable about it. Not pushing things off, because it's very easy, we all know, it's very easy if it's not one of those, it's like, if it's not an immediate priority, and it's not something that we know we have to get done in the next 2 or 3 or 4 days, it's easy to kind of go, And if it's something that we know we have months to get done, we push it off, right? And so when you make those commitments to yourself and you sit down and you say, this is my time and I'm going to do it and I'm not going to break it, can really help you stay on track. And then, you know, you can't really have a conversation, especially with graduate students, without talking about being well and taking care of yourselves. Because you all take good care of yourselves, right? Get a lot of rest, eat well. Yeah, oh good, no one's responding, so yeah, that must be the case, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the bookends about sleep and mental health in a minute, but we get it. We get that a lot of these things are difficult to do with your schedules. The problem is that these are the things that help you be well and help you be more productive, right? So all of these have a research proven that they help you be a more effective student and a more productive person, right? So eating regularly, eating well, that's kind of a loose term, but you know, eating well, some kind of physical activity. And with physical activity, for a lot of people, that's the first thing to go when you don't have time. Because you're like, I don't have time. And nobody's asking you to spend 3 hours a day training for a marathon. But taking a walk or doing something for a half an hour, at least a few times a week, helps improve a lot of things, including memory, including stress levels. And so if it can help you be more productive, then that half hour is probably worth more than a half hour in the long run, right? And mindfulness is a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially in our higher ed circles, right? When I talk about mindfulness, I'm not saying that everybody meditates, but it's great if you do, because that can be super helpful with helping yourself get grounded. It can be prayer, it can be any sort of thing that helps you sort of relax and get reconnected and refocused. And then community, this is another thing that came up a lot, right? And so having people to talk to, having a group who understands what you're up against and what you're experiencing, and having people that you can vent to about this challenge that you're in can be very, very valuable. And sometimes, again, it's the thing that goes, right? Like talking to your peers and spending time kind of decompressing, even if it's for a half an hour, is the thing that goes because you don't have time. But if you do it, you realize that, well, that was really helpful. And I feel a lot better. And I feel like I can kind of go back to what I need to do and stay a little bit more focused, right? And so graduate student mental health is like in a free fall, right? Like higher incidences of anxiety and depression that graduate students experience way higher than the general population. And it's for a lot of reasons. You're under a lot of stress. When you all were talking about why you're doing things, it's like, you know, the job is an end game, and being employed and doing that is important too. And the inherent stress of what you're doing, and then what's going to happen in the future. The stress and scariness of the future, it all comes together, right? And I can't necessarily do anything about that, right? But that's why those support systems are really critical. And we have you have access to counseling services. They do groups. You have access to that as part of being a Michigan Tech student. And so if you're feeling like you're not sure how to manage your stress, even if you don't want to do individual counseling, you just want to talk to somebody about how to manage stress or anxiety or whatever you might be feeling, I really encourage you to use those services. And then finding your time to rejuvenate. Again, I know that it can't always be, you're going to take 2 hours a day. I understand that, but finding a little time for yourself can help you refocus and re-energize. And this is a theme. This is another theme through all of those graduate students I talked to. That sleep is not negotiable. And when you think about your day and budgeting time during the day and where your time needs to go during the day, sleep is not negotiable, because when you aren't rested, it affects your productivity. It affects your ability to get things done. It messes with your stress levels. It messes with your emotions. You're more inclined to get sick if you're not sleeping regularly. And everybody can, figure their sleep out for themselves, right? But most adults need 7 or more hours of sleep a night. And if you don't need that much sleep, like if you need more or you need much less than that, you better have proof that you really function well on less than that, right? Because it hinders, it really is impactful, right? And so if you're staying up late to get things done, and then you're messed up the next day and you're not getting things done as well, it's all payoffs, right? Like, it's not sustainable in a long-term way. And I'm not telling you how much you have to sleep, but it should be probably about 6 or 7 hours a day. And this was another thing that came up. So I had those 10 people, and they talked about, finding something like when you have that break, that sometimes you can really backwards plan that rewarding yourself, right? So, you have a bunch of stuff to get done by the end of the semester, or you have a bunch of stuff to get done by this date, right? And that when those things are done, you can have something that's meaningful for you, something to look forward to, whatever that is. They talked about a lot of different things, like taking a trip, or just having some time to do things that you haven't been able to do for a long time because you've been so busy. And that can really help you rejuvenate and give you something to look forward to when things are not maybe as, when things are busy and you're feeling strapped and you're feeling overwhelmed. And so Heather talked about the library workshops, and they offer a variety of things. And I think you probably have had some familiarity with these things at different places, whether it's graduate student orientation or being a student on campus, that folks can be very helpful. There's a lot of workshops and a lot of opportunities on campus that talk about different things that would be helpful to you. There's a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into everything that's there, but usually, if it's something that relates to students being successful, it happens at some point during the semester. And if you watch that academic calendar and you watch the calendars, and Tech Today, does people know about Tech Today? You guys know about Tech Today? Usually everything's in there, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to turn it back over. I just threw something across the room by accident. I'm going to turn it back over to Heather to talk a little bit about balance.
So, another task. But balance really is an illusion. So we talk about balance, we talk about work-life balance. We talk about work-life balance all the time. I oversee the professional development for the Division of Student Affairs and Advancement here at Michigan Tech. And so some of the things that we talk about is we need more work-life balance. But that looks different for everybody. And so balance it's an illusion. And so you have to figure out what that balance looks like for you. There's some folks that I work with who cannot stand the thought of coming in on a weekend. Like that does not fit into their definition of how they view balance. And there's other people who feel far more productive if they can come in on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and work uninterrupted for 2 or 3 hours, and then they feel like they're really productive and ready to start the week. And so that for them is their balance. And so that's why it's kind of an illusion. And again, it's self-awareness. And so we're going to ask you once again to trust us, take you on this journey again. To really kind of think about our self-awareness and where we're at, where we're personally at again. Okay, so we've asked you to kind of think about why you're here. What's your purpose? Why we're putting ourselves through what we're putting ourselves through, right? What is it that we hope to do? And we've talked about some strategies for trying to manage all of our multiple tasks at hand. But this is really an opportunity for you to kind of get a sense for for where you're at in regards to the categories that that tend to relate to students, okay? And so when we're asking you to kind of think about your dashboard, the handout that Susan just handed to you is the dashboard we're thinking about, okay? We want you to just kind of get a sense for how satisfied you are, or how are things going in each of these categories, okay? And so we're using this similar to a gas tank, so from 0 to full. And we're looking at categories like with school, this could include class, like your classes that you're in, your workload, your performance. Work can be job performance, job satisfaction. You know, maybe you have extra jobs beyond your teaching assignments or your research positions. How does that factor into your overall self-awareness and your feeling? Play. Do you have time for play? And I'm not just talking about, you know, video games and Legos. Like, I know. I'm like, what is she talking about? You know, we're not in elementary school. But really, the things that are outside of the scope of school and work, what does that look like for you? And do you get enough of it? Like, where are you at right now? How full is your tank? Thinking about those things. And with the category of love, this is more of like that, where do you go? Where's that nurturing component? Do you have pets? I have dogs, I have a cat. That's cool. Those are kind of some of my my places to go and get some of that nurturing kind of thing. Do you have family? Do you have a partner? Do you have close friends? Like, where do you go to get that kind of that support? And then, are you happy with your overall health and well-being right now? I know when I've done this before, I've been like, you know, health and well-being, not full tank. I am not doing what I should be doing. It's one of the first things that I put on the back burner. I get busy, and you know, if I didn't meal plan for the weekend, terrible, terrible food choices. So just kind of think about that. And then the other category, use it or don't use it. Is there something that we're not thinking about, but we're not representing for you? But we want you to take a few minutes and just kind of think about, how happy are you with where you're at right now? What's your self-awareness? So if you want to go ahead and just kind of do some self-reflection and see where you're at. Like, you can mark on your tape, like you can color it in, or you can like put a line, or do some kind of physical, so you can do an indicator for yourself, sort of gradient pattern, perhaps. We crack each other up.
They just don't know how funny we are.
I know.
Anybody could just hear us talk.
Yes. Hilarious.
Let's just say that 3 to 5 hours is not my most focused time. I'm a morning person. I get punchy in the afternoon.
I was thinking that we should do one of those in a room that records. So then I can just,
I'm trying to think about it.
I'll write down post it and get back to it later.
Okay, so where is everybody at? Does anybody have certain areas or categories that they think they should give a little bit more attention to, or are going to try to prioritize a little bit more attention to? Anything you want to share out loud?
Well, school, which is the same as work, I need to get better at prioritizing things. And play. I don't really make time for game related.
Okay.
Yeah. But health, probably the only thing I need to prioritize more right now is sleep. Like sleep is the big lacking thing. But I still like exercise and eat relatively well, except for sleeping.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the health becomes main crucial thing which I'm unable to manage. In that, the sleep schedule and the quality of the schedule is really very bad, and because of that, many other things get affected. So that is my main concern. When I saw the sleep and the quality and the timings, I thought, okay, this slide is basically for me, maybe.
I heard about you and I put it in there.
So, yeah. And other things like on an average, play, work, school, it's not that bad. And I'm saying it's not good because of my health, the sleep quality and the schedule. So, yeah, I need to work on my sleep schedule and the quality of sleep.
Okay. Yeah, that sleep quality, like not only just the length of sleep, but the quality of sleep is huge. It's so huge. Like, yeah.
One thing actually I've been trying to work on, I guess, as far as like the love category thing goes, is having done my undergrad here, like everyone that came in with me has graduated for the most part now. So it's been really strange being in a place that I'm familiar with, but like completely lacking the same support group I had. And I was really surprised this semester specifically how much that impacted my performance and my quality of work, just because I noticed I was feeling really lonely. So that kind of ties into like the play part of my dashboard, I guess, because I started doing the rock climbing club, and that's helped me a lot, because it's like, you know, you see familiar faces, and I'll like set goals for myself, like, okay, I'm gonna go twice this week, and then it really forces me to go do something completely unrelated and talk to people.
Yeah. The isolation, I think, it's a far bigger problem than I think we stop and think about, or even, you know, community-wide, we stop and really spend a lot of time thinking about. It can be really, our programs can be very isolating. And particularly if you've had that experience of having the undergrad experience and then trying to re-navigate and rebuild those relationships in that community that you need. This is a community. Like the people in this room, you're all here for probably a variety of reasons, but you're all here. And just hearing your conversations at the very beginning of our time together, and when you were sharing the reasons why you're here. I mean, those are ways that you can help hopefully find people, maybe not necessarily in your program or in your major, but people who get it. And so hopefully you can extend some of those conversations beyond today. Maybe you've met some people you've not met before, and so you can start building that new level of community. At least knowing that you have each other from this experience to have conversation with. What other categories are?
I mean, another hurdle which most of the international students face because we are far away from our family, our friends. I mean, we are in a different world. If we say very frankly, means many times you cannot have the conversation with, like, with the phone or maybe online, which you can have when you have the person in front of you. So that's what she was mentioning about the loneliness, and like maybe sometime if you're not happy from inside, you may not feel better to interact with other people as well, because you're not very happy from inside. So that is another problem which sometime international student faces, because we cannot have opportunity to go maybe sometime in a year as in a year event. So yeah, so that is another, which may comes under the category of love, family, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really does stem into what Susan was talking about with that, the true nationwide research, the data-driven concerns about graduate student holistic health and mental health and wellness, because you have so many students are experiencing new experiences. And so if you are an international student coming to a new place and navigating this new place and being so far away from home, domestic students who elect to come to an institution that is completely different from their home experiences can experience some of those similar things. It's not easy to go home.
Regardless of where you
live.
Except
It's not,
for me, so
but it's not always easy to go home. Even if you're a domestic student, it's not always easy to go home. Trying to find the time, trying to find the financial resources to get home.
Trying to get out of here.
Trying to get out of Houghton in the winter, trying to fly. But those are all really tangible things that it's important to kind of think about and to talk to people about. Particularly if you're having a hard time finding that community, finding the supports. GSG can be a really great avenue to try to connect with other students with similar situations and experiences, right? I know you were going to share something.
So the one major change I've seen, reflecting back to any of my previous days, even when I was working, was the consistencies. So 3 days in a week I have classes at 8 a.m. in the morning. The other 2 days I don't have classes at all. And then there's the weekends. So you don't know what you're expected to do when. And especially having come from a tropical climate, all year round it's the same. So you have the same routine. You get up at 6 or 7 in the morning, you work, you attend class, and you go back home. So we're seeing a lot of changes in the weather, in the classrooms. So your body is not ready to accept all these changes, I think. So just because I think past couple of weeks since it's been snowing, I contemplate even getting out of the house. So this could be one reason for loneliness and not willing to meet people. But I think we need to shed those inhibitions, probably maintain a schedule. I try telling this to myself, but it's tough. I mean, I go back home today, I know I have the whole day tomorrow. I'm going to sleep late, get up late. There's no consistency. And my body is always trying to play catch up each time. So bringing in this consistency might help is what I feel. But it's tough.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And you have to commit, right? And so that's a decision that you have. That's the thing you have to decide that you're going to do for yourself. And I think that with the forming those habits, it's the first couple of weeks, right? You know about forming habits. It's the first couple of weeks, and it's kind of hard that first week, and then the second week it's easier, and it becomes easier to do it. But that aids with sleep too. When your sleep schedule stays fairly consistent when you go to bed and when you get up, helps with quality of overall sleep as well. And that's hard for humans, right? I mean, truthfully.
Then the time change was thrown in that mix too.
But I think that the thing about this exercise that I think can be really helpful is that taking some time to reflect on how you're feeling about things is not something that we necessarily do, right? Like, I'm not I'm not feeling great. And actually sitting down and thinking about why you're not feeling great, why you're not excited to get out of bed in the morning, Like maybe it isn't that maybe everything academically is okay and you like what you're doing, but suddenly there's 8 hours of sunlight a day and you don't see any of it, right? Or maybe it's because you haven't made connections and you're feeling super isolated. And so you can do things about that. It's not always the snap of a finger. I get it. Like it's not always that simple. But when you go, I am feeling really isolated. Maybe I will go to check this organization out, or maybe I will go to this event, or maybe I'll invite my office mate for coffee or something. If you take that time sometimes to think about yourself and be selfish about why you're not feeling good about things, or what you are feeling good about, it can be really helpful to sustain motivation and make changes to the things that aren't great, like your sleep, right? Like, oh, you know what? My sleep isn't very good, and maybe that could help me be more successful in what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Okay. Did anybody else want to share anything? So just some final thoughts and strategies that it really does say final thoughts up there, just so you know. Or reminders, okay? Just kind of things to think about, parting words. Be proactive. So take responsibility for your experience. If you don't feel like you're getting what you need out of your program, ask questions, talk to your advisor, and take an active role in your experience. Don't be passive. Don't wait for people to tell you what to do. Inquire, engage, ask those questions, okay? If you are struggling to make those connections, and it can be sometimes reaching completely out of our comfort zone, but try to ask for help. Ask people to help you get connected to folks, okay? Know your program requirements and timelines. So make sure you keep aware of that. I like to think that we all do that, but sometimes things can fall by the wayside. And it is ultimately your responsibility to keep track of that stuff. Okay, so between everything that's available on your My Michigan Tech account and everything that's available on the graduate school website and your conversations with your advisor, make sure you're keeping track of your deadlines. Deadlines that you need to complete coursework by, deadlines that you need to complete some of your requirements, so your proposals and those kinds of things. Having those conversations with your advisor about when you form a committee, okay? Take a professional approach to your academics. Sometimes that's a mindset shift. You're here and you're working towards some end goals. Make that your professional priority, okay? So maybe you had a different experience in your undergrad. Maybe you went to class in pajamas sometimes. Maybe you skipped class. Maybe, whatever the things are that we did as undergrads. Do a mindset shift. Take a professional approach to your time here. So make this your priority. Sometimes it helps to dress up for the occasion. Whatever those cases may be, whatever it's going to take to make you feel like you can take a better stab at it, okay? Give yourself permission to make mistakes. We don't want to necessarily always make mistakes in labs, right? That's bad. But writing, how many of you feel that you have some perfectionist tendencies and you don't want to turn things in until they're completely done? I was crippled by that. Give yourself permission to make mistakes, okay? And that goes hand in hand with writing in short sprints. It is more important to get something down on paper than for it to be perfect. And it took me a long time to get over that hurdle. A long time. Like it was finally, I had to get mad. I got pissed at myself. I got mad. And then when I was in one of my basically temper tantrum moments with myself, I just slammed out a rough draft. And then I was like, well, I've been dumb. Wow, that wasn't hard. I just needed to get over myself. and I needed to stop being traumatized by writing the perfect thing, and I just needed to get something down on paper so I could go back and mess with it and play with it. And have somebody take a look at it, have a colleague take a look at it, let alone my advisor, to see if I'm on the right path. But I had to get over myself, and I had to give myself permission to make mistakes. And that was really hard for me. So make sure you keep that in the back of your mind. It is okay to make mistakes. You've got to just let it go, move on, okay? And keep a journal. And so this came from numerous sources that I was reading and helping to prepare for like some of the best things to bring to you all today. Research journals, like if you're in research, they say keep a notebook and keep your thoughts and ideas, and don't ever throw that notebook away. Hang on to it, so when maybe you're 2 years into your program, you can go back and reflect on things and go, oh, that's still a really good idea. And look, I've kind of reinforced that. And you can incorporate that with the journaling of, oh yeah, I cannot forget it's my mom's birthday coming up. Write it down. Middle of the night. Best ideas come up in the middle of the night, right? Like, did I remember to check that? Write it down so you can go back to sleep. So you can make it an all-encompassing journal, or notes on your phone. If you have a smartphone, use the notes feature, like whatever it is that you need to do, but keep it. Don't throw it away. Hang on to it so you can refer back to it. Okay, the use worrying to your advantage. If you're worried about something, if there's something that is keeping you awake at night or is consuming your energy, stop and realize what that is and address it. Okay, that's what the worrying to your advantage is. If there's something that's underlying causing you some kind of concern, don't just be like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. Stop and kind of identify what it is and see if you can tackle the task, or at least set up some steps so you can feel more at ease. Does that kind of make sense? Like sometimes we can make ourselves almost physically sick worrying about things. And what is it that we're worrying about? And what steps can we put in place? Backwards planning. To take some of that worry away so we can take better care of ourselves. Okay? And this might seem silly, but get an accountability buddy. Who can you go to is going to hold you accountable? So if you're going to set a deadline, do you have an office mate you have a good relationship with? Do you have a friend? Do you have a friend back home? Whoever it is, see if there's somebody who can help keep you on task to check in with. It doesn't have to be your advisor. Okay, so it's not just the big thing.
It doesn't have to be about school. It could be like, hey, you're trying to get more sleep. Hey, how's that going?
Yeah.
How are you doing with that, right? Or whatever. Like somebody who will check in with you on how things are going.
Yeah. And then the most important, to learn how and when to say no. This can be hard. And it can take some practice, and it can take some subtlety and maybe finesse depending on who we're telling no to, right? So maybe an advisor or a supervisor is suddenly there's something that's a really big priority and you want to tell them no, but you're like, okay, how can I tell them no without saying no, there's absolutely no way. So learning how to rephrase things, say, okay, well that sounds like it's really important, and kind of finessing whatever it is that you have going on right now and seeing if there's a way that you can work on that in a while, okay? Or friends, office mates, telling people no, I'm sorry, no, I can't do that. I've committed to spending the next 2 hours writing. But learning how to say no is vitally important.
And I'll say that if you're good and you have said yes, people will keep asking you. And they'll keep asking you, and they'll keep asking you, and they'll keep asking you. And there will never be a shortage of people asking you to do things or be a part of something. And I think that it's good to be selective about those things, but those opportunities aren't kind of congruent with things that bring you some kind of joy or satisfaction, or with your professional goals. You can say no gracefully. And it's something that a lot of people do need practice doing. So again, I know it's not that simple.
So those are, that's what we have for you.
Any thoughts, any tips you want to share with each other? Any questions you have? Curiosities?
Plans for the week off school.
Try to figure out off.
I know, it's so funny, right? When we talk about Thanksgiving, like, oh, you have a week off, and you're like, not really, not anymore. And
not knowing that there was food. I brought snacks, so if you want to take a snack to go, please.
And also, as you're leaving, please make sure to sign in if you did not on your way in. And if your name's not on the sign-in sheet, if you could just add it down at the bottom, that'd be really appreciated. Thank you.
And if you ever need to get a hold of us, success@mtu.edu.
Going home somewhere.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It's like share, but for success.
I live downstate, in like the Detroit area. And I remember
Oh, yeah.
my department.
Oh, you would like to shut the
Stop the
You would like to shut the
recording.
recording. Research methods. And I remember one of the first things,